Welcome, my millions of fans, to my first reading out of the Book of Virtues. First up, we have the introduction. You may want to skip this, but then again, you may not. It's interesting. The introduction says, "This book is intended to aid in the time-honored task of moral education of the young. Moral education, the training of heart and mind towards the good, involves many things. It involves rules and precepts, and do's and don'ts of life with others, as well as explicit instruction, exhortation, and training. Moral education must provide training in good habits. Aristotle wrote that good habits formed at youth make all the difference, and moral education must affirm the central importance of moral example. It has been said that there is nothing more influential, more determinate, I'm tired, guys, in a child's life than the moral power of quiet example. For children to take morality seriously, they must be in the presence of adults who take morality seriously. And with their own eyes, they must see adults take morality seriously." It's kind of saying the same thing like 3 times. Along with precept, habit, and example, there is also the need for what we might call moral literacy. The stories, poems, essays, and other writing presented here are intended to help children achieve this moral literacy. The purpose of this book is to show parents, teachers, students, and children what the virtues look like, what they are in practice, how to recognize them, and how they work. This book, then, is a how-to book for moral literacy. If we want our children to possess the traits of character we most admire, we need to teach them what those traits are and why they deserve both admiration and allegiance. Children must learn to identify the forms and content of those traits. They must achieve at least a minimal level of moral literacy that will enable them to make sense of what they see in life, and, we may hope, help them to live it well. Where do we go to find the material that will help our children in this task? The simple answer is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have a wealth of material to draw on, material that virtually all schools and homes, churches once taught to students for the sake of shaping character. That many no longer do so is something this book hopes to change. And me to help change with it. Yay! Okay. The vast majority of Americans share a respect for certain fundamental traits of character: honesty, compassion, courage, and perseverance. These are virtues, but because children are not born with this knowledge, they need to learn what these virtues are. We can help them gain a grasp of and appreciation of these traits by giving children material to read about them. We can invite our students to discern the moral dimensions of stories, of historical events, of famous lives. There are many wonderful stories of virtue and vice. With which our children should be familiar. This book brings together some of the best, oldest, and most moving of them. Do our children know these stories, these works? Unfortunately, many do not. They do not believe in many places we are no longer teaching them. They do not because in many places we are no longer teaching them. It is time we take up that task again. We do so for a number of reasons. First, these stories, unlike courses in moral reasoning, give children some specific reference points. Our literature and history are a rich quarry of moral literacy. We should mine the quarry. Children must have at their disposal a stock of examples illustrating what we see to be right and wrong, good and bad. Examples illustrating that, in many instances, what is morally right and wrong can indeed be known and promoted. Second, these stories and others like them are fascinating to children. Of course, the Pedagog. I have no idea what that is. Pedagogy and the material herein will lead to be varied according to students' levels of comprehension. But you can't beat these stories when it comes to engaging the attention of a child. Nothing in recent years on television or anywhere else has improved on any good stories that begins with Once Upon a Time. Third, these stories help anchor our children in their culture, its history, its traditions, and the moorings and anchors come in handy in life. Moral anchors and moorings have never been more necessary. Fourth, in teaching these stories, we engage in an act of renewal. We welcome our children to a common world, a world of shared ideals, to the community of moral persons. In that common world, we invite them to the continuing task of preserving the principles and ideals, and the notions of goodness and greatness we hold dear. The reader scanning this book may notice that it does not discuss issues like nuclear war, abortion, creationism, or euthanasia. I have no idea what that is. They may come to a disappointment. This may come as a disappointment to some, but the fact that the formation of character in young people is educationally a different task from a prior task to the discussion of the great difficult ethical controversies of the day. First things first, implanting the ideas of virtue, of good traits in the young comes first. And in the moral life, as in life itself, we take one step at a time. Every field has its complexities and controversies, and so do ethics. And every field has its basics. So to values. Yeah, wow. This is a book in the basics. The tough issues can, if teachers and parents wish, be taken up later, and I would add, a person who is morally literate will be immeasurably better equipped than a morally illiterate person to reach a person an ethically defendable portion on these tough issues. But the formation of character and teaching of moral literacy comes first. In the early years, the toughest issues come... But the information of character and the teaching of moral literacy comes first, in the earlier years. The tough issues come later, in senior high school or after. Similarly, the task of teaching moral literacy and forming character is not political in the usual meaning of the term. People of good character are not all going to come down on the same side of difficult political and social issues. Good people, people of character and moral literacy, can be conservative, and good people can be liberal. We must not permit our disputes over thorny political questions to obscure the obligation we have to offer instruction to all our younger people in the area, which we have, as a society, reached a consensus, namely the importance of good character and on some of its pervasive particulars. And that is what this book provides, a compendium of great stories, poems, and essays from the stock of human history and literature. It embodies common and time-honored understandings of these virtues. It is for somebody, all children of political and religious backgrounds, and it speaks to them on a more fundamental level than race, sex, and gender. It addresses them as human beings, as moral agents. That's interesting. Every American child ought to know at least some of these stories and poems in this book. Every American parent and teacher should be familiar with some of them too. I know that some of these stories will strike some contemporary sensibilities as too simple, too corny, too old-fashioned, but they will not seem so to the child, especially if he or she has never seen them before. And I believe that if adults take this book and read it in a quiet place alone, away from distorting standards, they will find themselves enjoying some of this old, simple, corny stuff. The stories we adults used to know and forget. or the stories we never did know but perhaps were supposed to know, are here. Quick, what did Horatius do on the bridge? What is the sword of Damocles? The answers are in this book. I actually know the answers to neither of those questions. This is a book of lessons and reminders. In putting this book together, I learned many things. For one, going through the material was mind-opening and encouraging rediscovery for me. I recalled great stories that I had forgotten, and thanks... Wow, my neck's hurting. And thanks to the recommendations of friends, teachers, and the able prodding of my colleagues in this project, I came to know stories I had not known before, and I discovered again how much books and education have changed in 30 years. It's longer than that now. In fact, the copyright on this book is... wait for it. 1989. Wait, I'm looking. It says 1993. Can't be right. Huh, that's weird. Maybe this is a newer book or something. Where was I? So, I'm gonna have to restart this, you dork. Yeah. In 30 years. In looking at this old stuff, I am struck by how different it is from so much of what passes for literature and entertainment today. Most of the material in this book speaks without hesitation, without embarrassment, to the inner part of the individual to the moral sense. Today we speak about values and how it is important to have them, as if they were beads on a string of marbles, or marbles in a pouch. But these stories speak to morality and virtues not as something to be possessed, but as the central part of human nature, not as something to have, but as something to be. The most important thing to be. Yeah, emphasis on... To dwell in these chapters is to put oneself through the imagination into a different place in time, a time when there was little doubt that children are essentially moral and spiritual beings, and that the central task of education is virtue. This book reminds the reader of a time... Wait. Did I already read that? Oh, no, I didn't. This book reminds the reader of a time not so long ago when the varieties were the moral varieties. I see. It is thus a kind of antidote to some of the distortions of the age in which we now live. I hope parents will discover that reading this book with or to children can deepen their own and their children's understanding of life morality. If the book reaches that higher purpose, it will have been well worth the effort. A few additional notes and comments are in order. Although this book is titled The Book of Virtues, and the chapters are recognized by virtues, it is also very much a book of vices. Many of the stories and poems illustrate a virtue in reverse. For children to know about virtue, they must know about its opposite. In telling these stories, I am interested more in the moral than the historical lesson. In some of the older stories, Horatius and the Bridge, William Tell, George Washington and the Cherry Tree, the line between legend and history has been blurred. But it is in the instruction, in the moral that matters. Some of the history that is recounted here may not seem the standards of the exacting historian. But we tell these familiar stories as they were told before, in order to preserve their authenticity. Furthermore, I should stress that this book is by no means a definitive collection of great moral stories. Its contents have been defined in part by my attempts to present some material, most of which is drawn from the corpus of Western civilization. Yeah. That American school children once upon a time knew by heart. And the project, like any other, has faced several practical limitations, such as space and economy. The rights to reprint recent stories and translations can be very expensive, while older material often lies in the public domain. The quarry of wonderful literature from our culture and others is deep, and I have barely scratched the surface. I invite readers to send me favorite stories not printed here in case I should attempt to renew or improve this effort sometime in the future. I don't think that's happened. And seeing as the copyright's like actually not that far, it's like, I don't know. I don't know. Whatever. This volume is not intended to be a book one reads from cover to cover. It is rather a book for browsing, for making favorite passages, marking favorite passages, for reading aloud to family, for memorizing pieces here and there. It is my hope that parents and teachers will spend some time wandering through these pages, discovering or rediscovering some moral landmarks, and in time pointing them out to the young. The chapters can be taken in any order. On certain days we need to On certain days we need reminding of some virtues more than others. A quick look at the contents will steer the reader in the sought-after direction. The reader will notice that in each chapter the material progresses from the very easy to the more difficult. The early material in each chapter can be read aloud too, or even by very young children. As the chapters progress, greater readings and conceptual proficiency are required. Nevertheless, we urge young readers to work their way through as far as possible. As children grow older, they can reach for the more difficult material in the book. They can grow up, and perhaps even grow better, with this book. Finally, I hope that this is an encouraging book. There is a lot we read for experience in life that is not encouraging. No. Oh, okay. There is a lot we read of or experience in life that is not encouraging. He was really right in that. This book, I hope, does otherwise. I hope it encourages. I hope it points us to the better angels of our nature. That's a weird saying. This book reminds us of what is important, and it should help us lift our eyes. St. Paul wrote, "Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute." I thought it was report. Whatever is of good. Okay, whatever is of good report. If there is any excellence and anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things. Or in other words, think on these things. Whatever is ... I hope readers will read this book and dwell on those things. I am indebted to Bob Asina. I'm just gonna go Bob A. Okay. I'm indebted to Bob A, my able editor at Simon and Schuster, for the encouragement, advice, and usual sober judgment. Schuster for his encouragement. Oh, man. No. Sarah Pickney, also of Simon Schuster, kept the train running on time with her always on target and always gracious answers, solutions, and suggestions. Robert Barnett, my agent, provided sound counsel and enthusiasm for this venture. My two colleagues in this project deserve special mention. Stephen Tigner was judicious, knew when to find things and how best to describe virtues. He promised to help, and he did. He's a man of virtue. As to John Cribb, I cannot thank him enough for his efforts to make this book a reality. Unfailingly, he constantly mined the quarry at the Library of Congress in cartons of old books and piles of dog-eared magazines. He came to love the stories and the idea of this book. He was minor scout, archivist. I don't know how to pronounce that. Archivist. Researcher and critic. I owe him a great deal. I am grateful for the example of his friendship. Finally, my wife, Elaine. I always thought this was my book, the one book I had to do, and this was, as usual, right. Wait. Oh, no. Okay, finally, my wife, Elaine, always thought that this was my book. She thought it was the one that I had to do. And she was right as usual. She read, reviewed, guided, and recommended. As with everything else in my life, this too was made better because of her touch. And ironically enough, I owe her thanks because on many nights, long after I fell asleep, tired from a day of doing a lot of things, including putting this book together, she was the one still awake and reading good stories like these to our boys. That's awesome. You're really not supposed to be in on this. Okay. You know that the beginnings of the most important part of any work, especially in the case of a young and tender thing, for that is the time at which the character is being formed and the desired impression is more readily taken. Shall we just carelessly allow our children to hear any casual tales which may be devised as by casual persons, and to receive into our minds ideas for the most part the very opposite of those which we should wish them to have when they are grown up? We cannot. Anything received into the mind at that age is likely to become indelible and unalterable. And therefore it is most important that the tales which the young first hear should be models of virtuous thoughts. Then will our youth dwell in a land of health amid fair sights and sounds, and receive the good in everything, and beauty. The effluence of fair works shall flow into the eye and ear, like a health-giving breeze from a pure region, and insensibly draw the soul from the earliest years into likeness and sympathy with the beauty of reason. There can be no nobler training than that. Palto's Republic. I don't know who that is. Yeah, we're almost at 25 minutes. This is gonna take forever to upload. That was just the introduction. Okay, I'm only gonna read the first page. What? What? Probably. This is a very sensitive mic. Yeah, and I told you to turn the air conditioner off. I was like, throat motion. Well, but why are you even up here? I'm working. Well, I knew that already. All I have to do is finish this and get a shower. Monologuing here. This is not supposed to be a monologue. This is supposed to be a reading. Okay. In self-discipline, one makes a disciple of oneself. One is one's own teacher, trainer, coach, and disciplinarian. It is an odd sort of relationship, paradoxical in its own way, and many of us don't handle it very well. There is much unhappiness and personal distress in the world because of failures to control tempers, appetites, passions, and impulses. "Oh, if only I had stopped myself," is an all too familiar refrain. Dude, they read my thoughts. The father of modern philosophy, René Descartes, once remarked of good sense that everybody thinks he is so well supplied with it that even the most difficult to please in all other matters never desire more of it than they already possess. Let me say it again. He said, "Everybody thinks that he is so well supplied with it that even the most difficult to please in all other matters never desire more than they already possess of good sense." Interesting. With self-discipline, it is just the opposite. Rare indeed is the person who doesn't desire more self-discipline, and with it the control that it gives one over the course of one's life and development. That desire in itself, as Descartes might say, a further mark of good sense, is itself a good mark of good sense, a further mark of good sense. We do want to take charge of ourselves, but what does that mean? The question has been at or near the center of Western philosophy since its very beginnings. Plato divided the soul into three parts of operations: reason, passion, and appetite, and said that right behavior results from harmony or control of these three elements. St. Augustine sought to understand the soul by ranking its various forms of love in his famous Ordo Amoris: love of God, neighbor, self, and material goods. Sigmund Freud divided the psyche into the id, ego, and superego, and we find William Shakespeare examining the conflicts of the soul, the struggle between good and evil, called the psych. That's really cool. Hey, can you show me in a little bit? That's actually really cool. It's really pretty too. Have you showed Mommy yet? You should go show Mommy.
I did show.
Did you show Megan? Did you show Catherine?
I don't know where they are.
We should go find them.
I really don't know.
Okay. You should go find them.
And I need you to draw a dragon for me.
You just drew a dragon. I'll draw you a dragon later.
These are dragons.
You said they were dragons. Well, you should see if Mommy can hang it on the fridge so we can all see it. Awesome. Fine. And we find William Shakespeare examining the conflicts of the soul, the struggle between good and evil, called the psychomachia, in immortal works such as King Lear, Macbeth, Othello, and Hamlet. Again and again, the problem of one of the soul's proper balance and order. This was the noblest Roman of them all, and Antony says, and Brutus in Julius Caesar. I haven't read that. His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that the nature might stand up and say to all the world, "This was a man." But the question of correct order of the soul is not simply the domain of sublime philosophy and drama. It lies in the heart, It lies at the heart of the task and successful everyday behavior, whether it is controlling our tempers or our appetites, or our inclinations to sit all day in front of the television. As Aristotle pointed out, here our habits make all the difference. We learn to order our souls the same way we learn to do math problems or play baseball well, through practice. Patience, of course, is the medicine so many people find hard to swallow. If it were easy, we wouldn't have such modern-day phenomena as multi-million-dollar diet and exercise industries. Oh, that's true. We can enlist the aid of trainers, therapists, support groups, STEP programs, and other strategies, but in the end, it's practice that brings self-control. The case of Aristotle's contemporary what is that? Demosthenes illustrates the point. Demosthenes had great ambition to become an orator, but suffered natural limitations as a speaker. Strong desire is essential but it is by but by itself is insufficient. According to Plutarch, his inarticulate and stammering pronunciations he overcame and recorded more distinct by speaking with pebbles in his mouth. Okay. Give yourself an even greater challenge than the one you are trying to master, and you will develop the powers necessary to overcome the original difficulty. He used a similar strategy in training his voice, which he disciplined by declaiming and reciting speeches or verses when he was out of breath, while running or going up steep places, and to keep himself studying without interruption. 2 or 3 months together, Demosthenes shaved one half of his head, so that for shame he might not go abroad, though he desired it very much. And now you see people like with mohawks and tattoos on their heads, so that probably won't work anymore. Thus did Demosthenes make a kind of negative support group out of the general public that never saw him. Interesting, dude. 31 minutes. That'd be fun. Do you have a YouTube account?
Yeah.
You do? What's your YouTube account name?
Great Eastern Unit, and it's the bad base name.
Okay. So the first story, I'm just gonna read one story since that took like 32 minutes. Freaking monologuing. Is Good and Bad Children by Robert Louis Stevenson. Children, you are very little, and your bones are very brittle. If you would grow great and stately, you must try to walk sedately. You must still be bright and quiet, and content with simple diet, and remain through all bewildering. That's weird. They put apostrophe. And remain through all bewildering, innocent and honest children. Happy hearts and happy faces, happy play in grassy places. That is how, in ancient ages, children grew to kings and sages. But the unkind and unruly, and the sort who eat unduly, they must never hope for glory. Theirs is quite a different story. Cruel children, crying babies, all grow up as geese and gabies, hated as their age increases by their nephews and their nieces. Oh, no, that was it. Thank you. So,
That one was really good.
yeah, Good and Bad Children by Robert Louis Stevenson. Okay, as you know, this is The Book of Virtues by William J. Bennett. And that was the whole introduction and everything. And the first story, which was actually only 5 paragraphs. Or not verses. Well, 4 times 5. No, 20. Only 20 verses. Okay, so you will be hearing more. I say goodbye to everyone.